The stranger's gift, the rescue. Elena Rodriguez had exactly 47 minutes of oxygen left when her salvage ship's engines died. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any explosion could have been. In the vacuum of space, silence meant death was patient but certain. Her ship, the stubborn mule, drifted helplessly among the asteroid fragments of what had once been mining station Kepler 7. Elena had been scavenging valuable metals from the wreckage when her fusion drive suffered a cascade failure. The emergency systems had sealed the breach, but her ship was now nothing more than an expensive coffin floating in the dark. She pressed her face against the cockpit window, watching the stars wheel slowly past as her ship tumbled. 28 years old, and this was how it would end. Not in some heroic battle or grand adventure, but alone in the cold between worlds, running out of air one breath at a time. Elena had always worked alone. It was safer that way. No partners to betray you, no crew to split profits with, no one to disappoint when things went wrong. But now, as her breath fogged the inside of her helmet, she realized that dying alone was perhaps the worst fate of all. The proximity alarm chimed and Elena's heart jumped. Another ship? Out here in the dead zone between systems? She activated her emergency beacon and scanned the surrounding space with what little power remained in her sensors. What she saw defied explanation. The vessel that approached was unlike anything in human space. It seemed to be grown rather than built, its hull composed of what looked like living crystal that caught and refracted the light of distant stars. The ship moved with fluid grace, as though swimming through the vacuum instead of flying. Geometric patterns of soft blue light pulsed along its length in rhythms that seemed almost like breathing. Elena's radio crackled to life with a voice that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The words came through her universal translator, though she suspected the meaning was being conveyed as much through harmonics as through language. Human vessel, we detect your distress. Your life systems are failing. Do you require assistance? Elena keyed her transmitter with shaking hands. This is Elena Rodriguez of the independent salvage vessel Stubborn Mule. My engines are dead and I have less than an hour of life support remaining. Yes, I need help. Understood, Elena Rodriguez. We are the HFY. Prepare for retrieval. Among the crystal beings. The sensation of being transported aboard the alien vessel was unlike anything Elena had ever experienced. One moment she was sitting in her dying ship. The next, she was standing in a chamber that seemed carved from a single enormous geode. The walls pulsed with soft light, and the air itself seemed to hum with energy. Her rescuers were even more extraordinary than their ship. The HFY stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies composed of what appeared to be living crystal. Light flowed beneath their translucent skin in patterns that shifted with their emotions and thoughts. Their faces were hauntingly beautiful, with features that were almost human but refined by eons of evolution. The being who had spoken to her stepped forward, moving with a grace that made Elena feel clumsy by comparison. I am Xanthara, navigator of this vessel. You are safe now, Elena Rodriguez. Elena tried to speak but found her throat dry with shock and relief. Xanthara seemed to understand her condition and gestured toward an alcove in the wall. A soft melody filled the air and Elena felt her panic subsiding, replaced by a profound sense of calm. Your ship suffered what you call a cascade failure, Xanthara explained, the translator rendering the musical tones of their voice into words Elena could understand. The exotic matter you were salvaging contains quantum instabilities. Without proper shielding, such materials can cause unpredictable reactions. Elena finally found her voice. You saved my life. I don't know how to thank you. Thanks are not required, another HFY interjected as they entered the chamber. This one was even taller than Xanthara, with patterns of deep purple, light flowing beneath their crystal skin. I am Harmony Keeper Velthane. What we did was simply what any being should do when encountering another in distress, learning the HFY way over. The next several hours, as the HFY vessel carried Elena toward the nearest human outpost, she learned about her rescuers. The HFY were an ancient species, possibly millions of years old, who had long ago transcended the need for conquest or expansion. Their entire civilization was built around what they called resonant harmony, the idea that all consciousness was connected and that helping others ultimately helped oneself. They were explorers and healers, traveling the galaxy to study the Akor, infinite varieties of life, and to offer aid where needed. They had been investigating the quantum anomalies around Kepler-7 when they detected Elena's distress signal. "Your species is young," Velthane explained as they sat in the ship's observation chamber watching stars stream past at impossible speeds. "But you show great potential. Humans possess something rare in the galaxy, the ability to change, to grow beyond your origins." Elena, who had spent most of her adult life trusting no one, found herself opening up to these strange beings. She told them about her childhood on the mining colonies, about losing her parents in an asteroid collapse, about choosing the lonely life of an independent salvager because it meant never again depending on anyone else. "And yet," Xanthara observed gently, "here you are, depending on us." The words stung because they were true. Elena had built her entire life around self-reliance, but when the moment came, she had been helpless. These aliens had no obligation to save her, no reason to care whether she lived or died, yet they had risked their mission to pull her from the void. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why help me? What do you gain from this?" Belthane's crystal form pulsed with warm amber light. "We gain the knowledge that one more consciousness continues to experience the wonder of existence. We gain the possibility that someday, somewhere, you might extend the same kindness to another being in need. Kindness spreads through the universe like ripples in water." Elena Rodriguez. "Sometimes those ripples return to us in ways we never expect." The parting. When they reached human space, Elena was reluctant to leave. The Vexi had shown her a different way of looking at the universe, one where cooperation and kindness were not weaknesses to be exploited, but strengths to be cultivated. As she prepared to transfer to a human rescue vessel, Xanthara approached her with something that looked like a small crystal flower. "A gift," they said. "Though gift is not the right word in your language, consider it a seed." Elena accepted the crystal, which felt warm in her hands and seemed to pulse with its own inner light. "What does it do?" "It reminds," Xanthara replied. "When you look at it, remember this day. Remember that in a universe full of darkness and distance, beings can still choose to help one another for no reason other than it is right to do so." Elena clutched the crystal tightly. "I'll remember. I promise I'll remember. And perhaps," Velthane added with what might have been a smile, "someday you will have the opportunity to be the answer to someone else's prayers." As Elena transferred to the human rescue ship, she watched the Vexi vessel disappear into fold space, its crystal hull catching the light one last time before vanishing. She looked down at the crystal flower in her hands and made a silent vow. If she ever had the chance to repay this kindness, she would not hesitate. Seeds of change. Elena's rescue made headlines across human space. The first confirmed contact with the Vexi opened new possibilities for trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. Elena found herself at the center of these developments, serving as humanity's primary liaison with the crystal beings. But more than that, the experience had changed her fundamentally. The woman who had once trusted no one became an advocate for cooperation and mutual aid. She joined the Colonial Defense Force, rising through the ranks not through ruthless ambition, but through her ability to bring different groups together for common causes. The crystal flower Xanthara had given her became Elena's most prized possession. She kept it on her desk through years of service, through promotions and commendations, through victories and losses. It served as a constant reminder of the day her life had been saved by strangers who asked nothing in return except that the kindness be remembered. Years passed. Elena advanced to captain, then commander, then admiral. She established protocols for first contact with new species, always emphasizing the Vexi principle of extending help to those in need. Under her influence, human space became known not just for its military might or technological innovation, but for its willingness to provide aid to struggling civilizations. But Elena never forgot the debt she owed. In quiet moments, she would hold the crystal flower and wonder if she would ever have the chance to repay the beings who had saved her life. She told herself that living by their principles was repayment enough. But deep in her heart, she hoped that someday she could do more, that someday would come sooner than she expected, and when it did, the entire galaxy would learn what it meant to earn the gratitude of humanity. When the crystal worlds fell, the Message Admiral Elena Rodriguez was reviewing fleet deployment reports in her office at Earth Defense Command when the priority transmission arrived. At 58, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had spent 3 decades in service to humanity's expansion among the stars. The crystal flower still sat on her desk, its inner light a constant reminder of the day her life had changed forever. The message came through deep space emergency channels, its quantum encrypted signal bearing the harmonic frequencies that identified it as Vex-High in origin. Elena's heart skipped as she activated the translation protocols. It had been nearly 30 years since her rescue, and contact with the crystal beings had become increasingly rare as their explorations took them to the far reaches of the galaxy. When the holographic display finally resolved into the familiar, crystalline form of Xanthara, Elena felt a mix of joy and concern. Her old friend looked different. The flowing patterns of light beneath their crystal skin were erratic, pulsing with colors she had never seen before. When Xanthara spoke, their musical voice carried overtones of something Elena had never heard, from the peaceful Vex-High. Fear. Elena Rodriguez, if you still carry the memory of kindness, hear our plea. The obsidian swarm has found us. Our worlds burn, our people fall, and our songs grow silent. We who have wandered the stars for millennia face extinction. If there is debt between us, if you remember the gift of life freely given, we beg you to answer our call. The coordinates of our last stronghold follow this message. We have nowhere else to turn. The transmission ended, leaving Elena staring at the empty hologram in stunned silence. The obsidian swarm. She had heard whispers of them from traders and deep space explorers. A hive mind species that consumed everything in its path, converting organic and inorganic matter alike into extensions of their collective consciousness. They left nothing behind but dead worlds stripped of all resources. Elena's hands moved to the crystal flower on her desk, its warm light pulsing in harmony with her racing heartbeat. The debt would be repaid. She reached for her communicator. This is Admiral Rodriguez. Emergency Protocol 7. I need an immediate conference with the Defense Council. The Council debates. The Emergency Defense Council convened within the hour. Earth's most senior military and political leaders gathering in the secure chambers beneath Geneva. Elena stood before the holographic display showing the location of the Vex-High's last stronghold, a cluster of crystal worlds in a star system so remote it barely appeared on human star charts. The strategic situation is clear, Elena began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to propose. The Vex-High saved my life 30 years ago. They asked nothing in return except that the kindness be remembered. Now they face extinction, and they're calling in that debt. Defense Secretary Harrison leaned forward, his expression troubled. Admiral, we all respect what the Vex-High did for you, and their influence on our first contact protocols has been invaluable. But we're talking about deploying our entire fleet to fight a species we know almost nothing about, in a star system months away from any support. Admiral Chen, Elena's counterpart in the Colonial Defense Force, activated a tactical display showing what little intelligence they had on the obsidian swarm. The data we have is fragmentary, but what we know is terrifying. The swarm doesn't just conquer civilizations, it consumes them completely. No survivors, no traces left behind. They've devoured at least 7 species in the past century, which is exactly why we have to act, Elena replied firmly. If the swarm destroys the Vex-High, how long before they turn toward human space? This isn't just about repaying a debt, it's about stopping a threat before it becomes unstoppable. President Martinez, who had risen from junior diplomat to Earth's leader during Elena's career, studied the tactical projections with a grim expression. What are our chances of success? Elena had run the simulations dozens of times since receiving Xanthara's message. In conventional terms, almost zero, The swarm has technology we don't understand and numbers that dwarf our entire fleet. But humans have never won through conventional means. We win through innovation, adaptation, and sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The fleet assembles within 72 hours. The largest human fleet in history was assembling in Earth orbit. Every available warship, from massive dreadnoughts to quick-strike corvettes, answered the call. The sight of over 300 vessels arranged in perfect formation around humanity's homeworld was both inspiring and sobering. It represented nearly the entire military might of human civilization. Elena stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Resonant Harmony, named in honor of the Vexhai philosophy that had shaped her career. Around her, the bridge crew prepared for a journey that would take them further from Earth than any human military force had ever traveled. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving volunteers from across human space. Merchant, captains, independent traders, even some of the mining consortiums are requesting permission to join the fleet." Elena nodded, not surprised. The story of her rescue had become part of human culture, a reminder that kindness could come from the most unexpected sources. Now that the Vexhai needed help, civilians were willing to risk their lives to repay that ancient debt. "Grant permission to any ship that can keep up and follow orders," Elena commanded. "We'll need every hull we can get." The journey to Vexhai space took 6 weeks through the Fold space corridors. 6 weeks during which Elena pushed her crews through constant drills and simulations. They studied every scrap of information about the Obsidian swarm, developing tactics that emphasized humanity's greatest strengths: adaptability, creativity, and the ability to work together despite their differences. The Crystal Graveyard. When the human fleet emerged from Fold space at the coordinates Zenthara had provided, Elena felt her heart break. The system that had once housed the greatest Vexhai crystal cities was a graveyard. Shattered crystal formations drifted in space, their light extinguished, while massive obsidian vessels moved among the debris like scavengers feeding on a corpse. The swarm ships were unlike anything in human experience. They appeared to be constructed from the same dark, glossy material, a substance that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with organic fluidity despite their massive size, and Elena could see smaller forms constantly flowing between the larger vessels, like antibodies in a bloodstream. "Fleet status report," Elena commanded, her voice tight with controlled emotion. 312 human vessels ready for action," her tactical officer replied. "Long-range sensors detect approximately 1,000 obsidian ships of various sizes plus countless smaller forms that appear to be drones or fighter craft." On paper, the odds were hopeless, but Elena had learned long ago that humans were at their best when faced with impossible situations. "Signal the fleet. Execute Formation Delta. All ships, prepare for combat." The Song of Battle. The battle began when the obsidian swarm detected the human fleet and moved to intercept. Their approach was relentless and coordinated, like a tide of darkness flowing across space. But Elena had not come to fight a conventional battle. "All ships, implement Protocol Echo," she commanded. "Remember, we're not here to defeat them through firepower. We're here to buy time and create opportunities." The human fleet scattered into dozens of smaller groups, each one following seemingly random flight paths through the system. To the swarm, it must have looked like panic or poor coordination. In reality, it was exactly what Elena had planned. As the obsidian ships pursued the scattered human vessels, they began to spread out across the system. The swarm's greatest strength was its unity and coordination, but Elena was betting that she could turn that into a weakness. "Phase 2, execute," Elena ordered. "All science vessels begin quantum resonance scans. Find me those crystal fragments with active harmonic patterns." While the rest of the fleet played a deadly game of cat and mouse with the swarm ships, Elena's science vessels began scanning the battlefield for intact Vexhai crystal formations. The theory was based on something Zenthara had told her decades ago, that Vexhai crystal technology was based on harmonic resonance, and that even damaged crystal matrices retained some ability to amplify and focus energy. "Admiral." The science, Officer on the resonant harmony called out excitedly. We've found several large crystal formations with active harmonic signatures. They're damaged, but still functional. Elena smiled grimly. Signal all ships. Converge on the crystal formations. It's time to show the swarm what happens when humans and Vex-High work together. Harmony and discord. What followed was unlike any battle in human history. Instead of simply trying to destroy the obsidian ships, the human fleet began using the damaged Vex-High crystal formations as amplifiers for their own weapons. The crystals took the focused energy of human plasma cannons and magnified it, creating devastating beams that could slice through swarm hulls like a knife through paper. But more than that, the crystals began to sing. As human weapons charged their harmonic matrices, the ancient Vex-High formations responded with melodies that had once filled their cities with joy and wonder. The songs spread from crystal to crystal, growing stronger with each harmonic resonance. The obsidian swarm, for all its technological superiority, had no defense against this combination of human tactics and Vex-High harmony. The dark ships began to falter as the crystal songs disrupted their quantum coherence patterns. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, the swarm faced an enemy they could not simply absorb and convert. Elena watched from her bridge as swarm ships began breaking apart, their obsidian hulls cracking like eggshells under the harmonic assault. But the victory was not without cost. Human ships were falling too, overwhelmed by sheer numbers despite their tactical advantages. Admiral, her communications officer, reported, "We're receiving a transmission from the surviving Vex-High stronghold." The holographic display flickered to life, showing Zenthara once again. But this time the ancient being's crystal form pulsed with renewed light, and their voice carried overtones of hope rather than despair. "Elena Rodriguez, the songs of our ancestors ring through space once more. Your people fight with honor and courage beyond measure. But there is one final harmony that must be sung if we are to end this darkness forever." The final song, what Zenthara proposed, was both beautiful and terrifying. The surviving Vex-High would merge their consciousness with the crystal formations throughout the system, creating a harmonic resonance so powerful it would shatter every obsidian ship within a dozen light years. But the process would require the Vex-High to give up their individual existence, becoming one with the eternal song of their crystal cities. "It is not death as your species understands it," Zenthara explained as Elena's fleet fought desperately to protect the few remaining Vex-High vessels. "We will become part of something greater, something that will endure long after the swarm has been forgotten. But we need time to complete the resonance. Can your people give us that time?" Elena looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. They were young and old, from dozens of different colonies and backgrounds, but united by a common purpose. They had come to repay a debt, but they had found something more. A chance to save not just the Vex-High, but perhaps the entire galaxy from the obsidian swarm. "We'll give you all the time you need," Elena promised. "All ships, defensive formation around the crystal cores. Fight like the fate of the galaxy depends on it, because it does." The final phase of the battle was desperate and heroic. Human ships threw themselves against the swarm with reckless courage, buying precious minutes for the Vex-High to complete their transformation. Elena watched as her friends and comrades gave their lives to protect beings they had never met, repaying a debt that wasn't even theirs to begin with. And then the song began. It started as a whisper, barely audible above the sounds of battle. But it grew, spreading from crystal to crystal, from formation to formation, until the entire system resonated with a harmony so pure and powerful that it seemed to touch the very foundations of reality. The obsidian ships didn't just break apart. They dissolved, their dark matter converted back into the basic elements from which they had been forged. The swarm's hive-mind consciousness, faced with a force it could not understand or absorb, simply ceased to exist. In the silence that followed, Elena stood on her bridge and wept. The galaxy was safe, the debt was repaid, and the Vex-High lived on in a form more beautiful than any individual existence could have been. The echo continues. Years later, Admiral Elena Rodriguez would retire to a small colony world on the edge of human space. She kept the crystal flower on her desk until the day she died, and visitors often remarked on how it seemed to pulse in harmony with the distant songs that sometimes drifted through the night from the direction of the old Vexhai systems. The battle became known as the Harmony War, and its lessons were taught in every military academy in human space. Not just the tactical innovations or the technological breakthroughs, but the deeper truth that Velthane had tried to teach Elena decades before. Kindness spreads through the universe like ripples in water, and sometimes those ripples return in ways we never expect. Humanity's alliance with the crystalline consciousness that the Vexhai had become would endure for generations, a partnership between flesh and crystal, between the young and the ancient, between those who asked for help and those who answered the call. And in the deep space between stars, where lonely travelers sometimes found themselves in distress, there were always those ready to extend a helping hand, remembering the echo of kindness that had once saved the galaxy itself.